The English language is the second most spoken language of the world, but many centuries ago it was nothing but an obscure dialect spoken by very few people. Its most ancient beginnings start in Europe in about 3000 BC, where the Celtic people lived around the Baltic area of Europe. The Celtic language was starting to make its way to the territories across the continent, where now the countries of France, Spain, and Germany reside. The Celtic language developed by its own for a few thousands of years, until an arrival that will change its course. The Roman Empire was on strike, and the Celtic people that lived in the continent were being raided by the Romans, as far as the English Isles. After the Romans took possession of the land, the language was relegated to something only people of low value could speak. Because the Romans now were dominant, the language spoken now was Latin, used only by the highest people, making the Celtic a low way of talk. Many years went by, until the Roman Empire collapsed, thus its language. Now the Latins were scattering and the Celtic could thrive again. But because the Roman influence was so big around that era, the language was simply not the same, now adopting some aspects of the Latin language, making it somehow
richer.
But even if the Celtic language had its time to shine, it wouldn't last long until another intervention would arrive, the Angles. Although they did not intend to crush the party, they had to escape from the Huns. But after settling in English territories, the merge of both cultures influenced the language. But because of the Christianism being the new hip thing, the language started to gather influence from
The Bible.
Thus, the English language as we know it appeared. Because the language sure resembles the English we now speak. But see, then it was structured fairly different. Because the language didn't have words for things related to thy mighty words of thy Lord, they were led to create new words to accommodate their new beliefs. And the language will get even more wibbly-wobbly, because now the language was pushed from Britain to places like Scotland and Ireland, creating diversions over time. But the English language was settled now, and it was used to write epic religious tales like
Beowulf!
And the stories of
Just thought I might help set the mood, you know, for your big heart-to-heart chat.
King Arthur and his knights, stories that later will be translated into modern English and then adapted into Transformers somehow. But around that time, the Viking incursions were the new hot thing. Everyone was being influenced by them, whether they liked it or not, resulting in the English language being yet again influencing, now incorporating words like son, creating the most generic last names we have in present time. Just take a word, add son, and boom, there's a last name. And all thanks to the Vikings. After that intervention on the journey of the English language, the language will yet again settle, to be mainly used by everyone during the many battles of that period. Until Guillermo of Normandy arrived, because now English was relegated to low status smelly little family guys who weren't rich enough to speak the new cool language, French. This little overtaking resulted in the influence of French on English. So by this point we went from Celtic to Latin to Christian to Anglo to Viking to French. Wow. And now, because of the takeover, English was no longer written, and only used for peasant talk. So now the only place that speaks normal English is, well, England. But even though it was relegated, it was still taught to the people. Some madmen even wrote on it. And by the time went by and the war between France and England was being fought over hundreds of years, finally, there was a time where English by law became the main language. With new books written showing their brand spanking new French influences, in 1474 the first printed English book appeared, creating history. Now that English was standardized, it gained new additions due to the rise of science, the borrowing of Latin and Greek words, and the influence of Shakespeare. The language kept evolving. getting much more influenced by the world. So then the language traveled to America, where it took over the north and began to shift more by the cultures it was absorbing and getting absorbed into. The language now made its way to Australia, India, Singapore, South Africa, among others. So we arrived to recent times, where we have many types and accents. Getting more modernized with the rise of technology and the internet, now we use slang, terms, and even abbreviations to define things. And we use it for everyday talk, even if it isn't our main language, thanks to its spread in media. And all of this so we could say,
Okay, so these bricks are just floating here?